the inevitable end of an era of tyranny. As the resistance forces closed in on Ruda's opulent mansion, the air was thick with anticipation. The echoes of battle still reverberated through the war-torn streets, but the tide had turned irreversibly. Kodo, the embodiment of determination and unwavering resolve, called for a momentary halt about a kilometer away from the Datu's residence. The cheers of the resistance army resounded through the city, a triumphant chorus that heralded the inevitable end of an era of tyranny and oppression. Victory loomed on the horizon, a beacon of hope shining through the chaos and turmoil that had gripped the continent for so long. Kodo, his presence commanding and resolute, stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the imposing structure of Ruda's palace. The war had reached its climax, and the moment had come to issue the final challenge. With a voice that carried across the battlefield, amplified by powerful loudspeakers, Kodo spoke to Ruda, the tyrant who had ruled with an iron fist. Ruda, Kodo's voice boomed, filled with the weight of centuries of oppression and the indomitable will of the people. "Do you hear me? I believe you do." The sound of his words echoed off the ruined buildings, reverberating through the silent streets. "We are all soldiers, bound by duty to protect our country and sacrifice for its greater good. But as leaders, it is our solemn responsibility to minimize casualties and preserve the lives of our soldiers." His words were heavy with meaning, each one carefully chosen to pierce through the walls of Ruda's palace and into the heart of the tyrant himself. This war has reached its inevitable conclusion. The resistance forces have encircled your palace, and escape is futile. Your destiny is sealed, Ruda. Your reign has crumbled, your tyranny has been exposed, and the people have risen against you. The shackles you imposed upon them will exist no more. Freedom will embrace the people of all nations, allowing them to live in peace and prosperity. Kodo's voice, steady and resolute, carried with it the force of the countless lives that had been sacrificed in the struggle for freedom. He paused for a moment, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in before continuing. "The soldiers under your command," Kodo's tone softened slightly, tinged with empathy, "have families eagerly awaiting their safe return. Their destiny now lies in their own hands, not yours. You have forfeited the right to dictate their fate, Ruda. I implore you to call upon your soldiers to lay down their weapons, to end this senseless bloodshed. Let your soldiers return home to share a meal with their families, to rebuild their lives in a world free from tyranny and oppression." The silence that followed was profound, the only sound being the distant crackle of fires still burning in the city. The resistance forces, standing behind Kodo, felt the weight of the moment, knowing that history was being written with each passing second. Kodo's words were more than just a call to surrender, they were a call to redemption, a chance for Ruda and his followers to choose humanity over pride. "I await a face-to-face meeting, Ruda," Kodo declared, his voice strong and clear, cutting through the stillness like a knife. "Just you and me. Do you comprehend the gravity of my words?" Kodo stepped back, his gaze never wavering from the distant palace. The challenge had been laid out, and now the world waited with bated breath for Ruda's response. Behind the stone walls of the Datu's residence, Ruda's mind churned. He had been a ruler who thrived on power, who saw strength as the only truth. But now, as he looked out at the encircling forces, the full weight of his isolation pressed down on him. Inside his palace, surrounded by the remnants of his loyal legion, Ruda paced back and forth, his heart pounding with a mixture of anger and dread. He had known power all his life, wielding it with a ruthlessness that had kept his enemies at bay. But now, power had slipped through his fingers like sand, and all that remained was the reality of his imminent defeat. "Kodo," Ruda muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with venom. The name burned in his mind like a brand, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. But Ruda was not a man to yield easily. His pride, his identity, was wrapped up in his power. To surrender would be to deny everything he had built, everything he believed in. Yet, deep down, a gnawing fear began to take root, a fear that this might be the end, that Kodo's words might not just be the proclamations of a victor, but the truth of a new world order that had no place for tyrants like him. He stopped pacing and turned to the few generals who still remained by his side, the last vestiges of his once mighty army. Their faces were grim, worn down by the endless battles, their loyalty wavering under the pressure of inevitable defeat. "What should I do?" Ruda demanded, his voice trembling slightly as he looked at his advisors. "Do we continue to fight? Or do we surrender to this usurper?" The generals exchanged uneasy glances, the question hanging in the air like a guillotine. Finally, one of them, General Jovan, a man who had served Ruda for decades, spoke up, his voice steadied but laden with resignation. "Datu," Jovan began, "we have fought long and hard, but the resistance has overwhelmed us. Kodo has the advantage now, and our forces are depleted. If we continue to fight, we risk the complete annihilation of our people." Ruda's eyes narrowed, his hands clenching into fists. "So, you suggest we surrender? After everything we've done, after everything we've sacrificed?" Another general, Marin, stepped forward, his expression somber. "Datu, this is not just about us. This is about the future of Guerrillist. Kodo is offering us a chance to save lives, to prevent further bloodshed. We must consider the greater good." Ruda felt the walls closing in on him, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and fear. The very idea of surrender was anathema to him, a bitter pill he could not swallow. But as he looked into the faces of his generals, he saw the truth reflected in their eyes. His reign was over. A leader's final command. In the hushed confines of the room, amidst the flickering candlelight and the heavy silence that hung in the air like a shroud, Ruda found himself drawn into a retrospective reverie. His life unfolded before his mind's eye like a slow-motion tableau, each moment etched with indelible clarity. From the tender memories of childhood spent in the embrace of his loving family to the grand triumphs of a distinguished military career that had propelled him to the pinnacle of power and authority. Glory and success had illuminated Ruda's path like beacons in the darkness, guiding him through the tumultuous seas of adversity and uncertainty. Every challenge conquered, every victory achieved, stood as a testament to his strength, resilience, and unwavering determination to carve out his place in the annals of history. But now, as he stood on the precipice of defeat, confronted by the stark reality of his crumbling empire, Ruda couldn't help but feel the weight of his own mortality bearing down upon him. The memories of his father, Major General Hurus, loomed large in his mind. Hurus, a man revered by the entire Guerrillist nation, had shaped Ruda into the leader he had become. Hurus was more than just a father. He was a figure of immense power, a hero to many, but also a man driven by an insatiable hunger for control. Ruda had always admired his father's strength and cunning, but now, as the empire they had built together began to collapse, Ruda was forced to confront the darker aspects of his legacy. Contemplating his father's actions, Ruda grappled with a mixture of horror and inspiration, a dichotomy that fueled both shame and fortitude in equal measure. He had followed in Hurus's footsteps, striving to surpass him, to be stronger, more feared, more revered. But now, as defeat loomed, he could see the futility of it all. The relentless pursuit of power had led them both down a path of destruction, and the price had been paid in blood, by their enemies, by their soldiers, and by the people they had vowed to protect. In this moment of reflection, Ruda made a decision, one that was as much an act of redemption as it was a concession of defeat. The time had come to put an end to the violence, to spare his soldiers the fate that awaited them if they continued to fight a losing battle. He knew that they had served him faithfully, and now he owed them a chance at a future beyond the battlefield. With a deep breath, Ruda summoned his remaining commanders. As they gathered before him, their faces lined with exhaustion and uncertainty, Ruda spoke with a calm authority that belied the turmoil within him. "Men," he began, his voice steady, "this war has brought enough pain, enough loss. The time has come to lay down our arms." The commanders exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of their leader's words. They had fought beside him through countless battles, had seen him lead with unwavering resolve, and now, in this moment of crisis, he was asking them to surrender. Ruda continued, his tone resolute. "We have fought valiantly, and our soldiers have given everything in the name of Guerrillist. But we must face the reality of our situation. We cannot win this war. To continue would only bring more death, more suffering. I will not ask our soldiers to make that sacrifice. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The room was silent, the only sound the faint flicker of the candles casting long shadows on the walls. "Tell the soldiers," Ruda said, his voice firm, "to lay down their arms. Let them return to their families, embrace a normal life, and relish the joys of peace." There was a stunned silence as the commanders processed the order. Some looked relieved, others conflicted, but none could deny the sense of finality in their leader's words. Ruda looked each of them in the eye, his gaze unwavering. This is not a surrender out of weakness, but a decision made with the understanding that there is no victory to be had in further bloodshed. Our soldiers have served us with honor. Now it is time to give them the chance to live the lives they deserve. He could see the tension easing from their shoulders, the understanding dawning in their eyes. The war was over, and it was time to bring their men home. Declining any companionship or escort, Ruda, with steely resolve and a sense of grim determination, prepared himself for the impending rendezvous with Kodo. His soldiers were tasked with delivering a message to their adversaries, a message that conveyed Ruda's tacit acceptance of a face-to-face meeting, a gathering where no interference would be tolerated, where the fate of nations would be decided by the clash of wills between two formidable leaders. As he watched his commanders leave to carry out his orders, Ruda felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The die had been cast, and the final chapter of his reign was about to unfold. It would be a confrontation not merely of physical might, but an intricate dance of souls and pride, a battle of wits, ideology, and conviction between two men who had each staked their claim to greatness, and who now stood on opposite sides of history's stage, destined to collide in a cataclysmic showdown that would shape the destiny of nations. The final reckoning. Kodo stood resolute at the gates of Ruda's mansion, the Zeep machete firmly gripped in his hand, a potent symbol of power and defiance. Despite the warnings from his former allies in the resistance, cautioning against unnecessary risks, Kodo brushed off their concerns with a confident and determined smile. To him, understanding Ruda's character was paramount, a crucial aspect of preparing for the fateful confrontation. He believed that beneath Ruda's veneer of tyranny, remnants of heroism still lingered, ready to confront him head-on. As Kodo entered the mansion alone, he was surprised to find it eerily deserted. Every door, from the entrance to Ruda's personal chamber, stood ajar, as if anticipating his arrival. The dimly lit corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, echoing with the weight of history and the ghosts of past conflicts. Each step brought him closer to his destiny, closer to the moment of reckoning with the man who had shaped his fate in ways both profound and devastating. Entering the chamber where Ruda awaited him, Kodo felt a surge of conflicting emotions wash over him. Anger, resentment, and a burning desire for revenge warred with a sense of grim determination and steely resolve. He knew that this would be no ordinary confrontation, that the outcome would determine the fate of nations and the course of history itself. In the distance, Kodo spotted a figure, and on a nearby table lay a Zeep steel axe. Ruda's familiar voice resonated through the dimly lit room. "Greetings, old adversary. The perpetual rival. I acknowledge your prowess, but releasing you in moments of vulnerability was a miscalculation, twice, to be exact. Do you recall? Today marks our final historic confrontation. Only one of us will exit this room." Ruda's presence loomed large in the chamber, his imposing figure framed by the flickering candlelight. The Zeep steel axe gleamed menacingly on the table beside him, a silent testament to the power and authority he wielded. Despite the gravity of the situation, there was a hint of amusement in Ruda's eyes, as if he relished the opportunity to face his old adversary once more. Kodo's grip tightened around the hilt of the Zeep machete as he returned Ruda's gaze with a steely determination of his own. "Do you recognize this machete?" he asked, his voice thick with simmering hatred. "Just wielded it to slay my father, Natsu. Every twist of fate leading to this moment is your orchestration. You murdered my father, seized my Durica, and tarnished my name. This is our fourth encounter, with the previous three left unresolved. I know your proficiency with an axe. Pick it up, for today, I shall duel you with this machete." Ruda's expression remained impassive as he reached for the Zeep steel axe, his movements deliberate and controlled. There was a palpable tension in the air as the two adversaries faced each other across the room, their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. In that moment, it seemed as if the entire world held its breath, waiting for the first move to be made. But instead of charging forward, Ruda spoke. His voice was low and steady, tinged with a cold detachment that sent a chill through the room. "You speak of vengeance, Kodo, of wrongs committed and justice denied. But what is justice? A word? A notion? Something we justify with blood and steel?" He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You and I, we are not so different. Both shaped by our pasts, driven by forces beyond our control. But you," he pointed the axe at Kodo, "you see yourself as the hero in this story, the righteous avenger. But tell me, Kodo, how many have you slain in the name of your so-called justice? How many lives have you ruined?" Kodo's grip tightened on the machete, his anger flaring. "I fight for the people you've oppressed, for the lives you destroyed in your quest for power. You hide behind words, Ruda, but there's no escaping the truth. You are a tyrant, and today you will pay for all you've done." Ruda shook his head slowly, a mirthless smile playing on his lips. "A tyrant? Perhaps. But power is not something one simply grasps. It is something one earns, something one holds onto with everything they have. You think you can walk into this room, armed with nothing but your righteous indignation, and take it from me? You're a fool, Kodo. And you," Kodo shot back, "are a relic of a past that has no place in the world we're building. The people no longer fear you, Ruda. They see you for what you are, a coward, hiding behind soldiers and walls. But those walls are crumbling, and your reign of terror ends today." Ruda's eyes narrowed, his grip on the axe tightening. "You're naive, Kodo, if you think this ends with my death. Even if you strike me down, the seeds of power have been planted too deeply. Others will rise to take my place, and the cycle will continue." Kodo shook his head, stepping closer. "This is where the cycle breaks, Ruda. It ends with us. You've spent your life manipulating, controlling, destroying. But the world is changing, and no amount of power will save you from that change." For a moment, there was silence between them, the weight of their shared history pressing down on the room. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Ruda set the axe back on the table. "You believe you're here to avenge your father, to right the wrongs of the past. But this is not about Natsu, nor is it about the lives lost in this war. This is about you and me, Kodo. This is about what we've become, what we've allowed ourselves to become." Kodo's heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to maintain his composure. The man standing before him was not just his enemy, he was a reflection of the darkness that had taken root in his own soul. He knew he could not allow that darkness to consume him, to define him as it had defined Ruda. "Perhaps you're right," Kodo said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps we are more alike than I'd like to admit. But that doesn't change what must be done. You have brought nothing but pain and suffering to the world. Today, that ends." Ruda nodded slowly, as if resigned to his fate. "So be it, Kodo. But know this, if you strike me down, the man who walks out of this room will not be the hero you think he is. The darkness in me lives in you too, and it will only grow stronger if you let it. You may defeat me, but you will never be free of me." Kodo hesitated, the weight of Ruda's words pressing down on him. But he knew there was no turning back. He had come too far, sacrificed too much to walk away now. With a final, resolute nod, he steeled himself for the task ahead. "I will not let the darkness win, Ruda. I will be better than you. And when this is over, I will build a world where men like us no longer hold power over the innocent." With that, Kodo stepped forward, the Zeep machete gleaming in his hand, ready to bring an end to the tyranny that had plagued his people for far too long. The inconclusive reckoning. In the heart of Ruda's mansion, a fierce, intense battle unfolded between Kodo and Ruda, the air saturated with the anticipation of a final reckoning. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls as the two men, bound by their shared history and the weight of their decisions, faced each other with weapons drawn, ready to settle the score that had been years in the making. Ruda, standing tall with the Zeep steel axe in his grip, felt the weight of his father's misdeeds pressing down on him. With swift determination, Ruda unleashed a display of extraordinary martial skill. The years had honed his abilities to a razor's edge, and the Ruda of today was a far cry from the man Kodo had faced before. His movements were fluid, precise, and powerful, each strike of the axe carrying with it the force of a man who had nothing left to lose. Kodo, witnessing Ruda's mastery with the axe, could not help but admire the flexibility and precision of his opponent's movements, even as he prepared himself for the onslaught. The battle began with a relentless exchange of strikes, Ruda slashing at Kodo's side with deadly accuracy, while Kodo evaded the blow and retaliated with a swift swing of the machete aimed at Ruda's shoulder. The engagement continued in a blur of motion, the two combatants moving with the speed and grace of seasoned warriors. Ruda, demonstrating a seamless transition from right to left-handed strikes, caught Kodo off guard, landing a blade into Kodo's left side. Kodo was amazed at Ruda's ambidexterity. It was truly rare for anyone to be proficient in using both hands with such deadly efficiency, especially with a weapon as unwieldy as an axe. Ruda smiled mysteriously, a glint of triumph in his eyes, as he pressed the attack. Despite the wound, Kodo remained undeterred. He had come too far, sacrificed too much, to falter now. With a fierce determination, he brandished his machete and launched a series of relentless attacks from various angles. Each swing was calculated, each strike aimed at exploiting a weakness in Ruda's defense. But Ruda was no less determined. He parried Kodo's blows with the ease of a master, countering with attacks of his own that kept Kodo on the defensive. The clash endured for over an hour, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The mansion echoed with the sound of steel clashing against steel, the grunts of exertion, and the heavy breathing of the two combatants as they pushed themselves to their limits. Blood stained the floor, a testament to the ferocity of the battle, but neither Kodo nor Ruda showed any signs of backing down. As the fight dragged on, Kodo began to realize the precarious nature of his situation. While he had managed to dodge most of Ruda's lethal blows, the cuts on his body were beginning to take their toll. The pain was sharp, but it served only to fuel his determination. He knew that this was no ordinary battle, it was a spiritual challenge, a test of willpower and endurance as much as it was a physical confrontation. With every strike exchanged between them, the weight of their shared history pressed down upon them. Memories of past conflicts and betrayals flashed through Kodo's mind, driving him to fight with an unyielding determination. He remembered the day Jess had slain his father, Natsu, with the very machete he now wielded. He remembered the years of planning and sacrifice, the lives lost in the struggle to bring Ruda to justice. It all led to this moment, and Kodo knew that he could not afford to fail. But Ruda was equally determined. Despite the physical toll of the battle, he remained steadfast, drawing upon reserves of strength and willpower that seemed inexhaustible. Each swing of his axe was delivered with deadly precision, a reminder of the power and authority he had wielded for so long. For Ruda, this battle was not just about survival, it was about proving that he still had control, that he was still the master of his own destiny. As the battle raged on, the mansion seemed to close in around them, the walls echoing with the sounds of their struggle. Every movement was calculated, every strike aimed with deadly precision as they sought to gain the upper hand. But for all their skill and determination, neither Kodo nor Ruda could gain a decisive advantage. Each blow was met with a counterattack, each parry swiftly followed by a riposte. It was a battle of equals, a contest of wills that seemed destined to stretch on indefinitely. Exhausted but undeterred, both men knew that this confrontation would not end easily. The tension in the air was palpable, the outcome uncertain as they continued to clash, neither willing to give an inch. The world outside the mansion seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, locked in a deadly dance that could end in victory for neither. In that moment, as they circled each other with weapons drawn, Kodo and Ruda both understood that this was more than just a battle. It was a reckoning, not only with each other, but with the choices they had made, the lives they had taken, and the legacies they would leave behind. The battle was inconclusive, and as they paused, both knew that the end was not yet written. Deception and desperation. After an exhausting hour and a half of intense combat, Kodo realized that if they continued this battle without the element of surprise, they would both die. Both warriors were nearing the limits of their endurance, the strain of the fight evident in their labored breathing and the sweat that glistened on their brows. The mansion's dim light cast long shadows on the walls, heightening the tension in the room, as both men knew the stakes of this deadly dance. Kodo knew he needed to change the course of the battle. Ruda's prowess with the axe was formidable, and any direct confrontation could spell disaster. He needed a plan, something that would give him the upper hand, and he needed it fast. Swiftly, Kodo formulated a plan. He would use deception, a tactic that had served him well in the past, to create an opening. With a determined glint in his eyes, he began executing a series of feints, his movements calculated and precise. Feinting a slash towards Ruda's left side, Kodo watched as Ruda braced himself to counter the attack. But in the blink of an eye, Kodo pivoted on his heel and delivered a decisive blow to Ruda's right. The sudden change in direction caught Ruda off guard, his defenses momentarily compromised. Capitalizing on the confusion, Kodo executed a surprising maneuver. Dropping to the ground with cat-like agility, he slashed upward with his machete, aiming for Ruda's exposed side. Ruda, unable to react in time, emitted a subdued exclamation of pain as the machete sliced into his armpit, drawing blood. The injury slowed Ruda's movements, his strength beginning to wane. Seizing the opportunity, Kodo sprang back into action with renewed vigor. He positioned himself behind Ruda, where his opponent was most vulnerable, and unleashed a forceful downward slash toward Ruda's head. Ruda, summoning the last of his strength, managed to turn around and block with his axe. But Kodo's relentless force inflicted a severe wound on Ruda's shoulder, causing him to drop his weapon with a metallic clang that echoed through the room. With precision and an almost eerie calm, Kodo aimed the machete at Ruda's chest, ready to deliver the final, decisive strike. Ruda, though bloodied and weakened, was not yet defeated. With an iron will, he used both hands to grab the blade of the machete, his hands slick with blood from the deep gash on his shoulder. He bore the pain without uttering a cry, his expression remaining resolute, his eyes locked onto Kodo's with an unyielding intensity. Kodo could feel Ruda's resistance, the weight of the man's resolve pressing against his own. He knew that Ruda was fighting not just with his strength, but with his pride and the legacy of his father, Major General Hurus, the man who had shaped his life and fueled his ambition. As Kodo prepared to exert the final force needed to pierce Ruda's chest, something unexpected happened. A sudden figure emerged from the distance, rushing towards them with desperate speed. The silhouette, moving with urgency, embraced Ruda just as Kodo was about to land the fatal blow, disrupting what would have been Kodo's imminent victory. The unexpected intervention threw Kodo off balance, his focus momentarily shattered by the surprising turn of events. He pulled back his machete, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make sense of the new development. The figure, shrouded in the dim light of the room, clung to Ruda, as if shielding him from harm. Blood flowed like rain in the midst of the bloody war, the air thick with the scent of iron and sweat. In this climactic moment of tension and suffering, the sudden appearance of the unknown figure added an unforeseen layer to the confrontation between Kodo and Ruda. The battle, it seemed, was far from over, and the true resolution of their conflict remained uncertain. Shadows of redemption. Kodo's eyes widened in shock as the figure embracing Ruda came into focus. It was Durika, her once youthful beauty now tinged with the marks of time. Though the radiance that had once captivated him still lingered, the decade that had passed since their last encounter had left its indelible traces on her face. Kodo, caught between a whirlwind of emotions, found himself perplexed in the presence of this woman who had once meant so much to him. Tears streamed down Durika's face, her voice trembling as she spoke. "It's not because of Ruda," she whispered, her words thick with emotion. "He doesn't do anything wrong. He's been a good husband to me." Ruda, his face a mixture of fear and despair, turned to Durika, his voice frantic and desperate. "Why do you know about my father's secrets? Don't say anything else, Durika. I beg you. Please, let me die with honor." But Durika shook her head, her sobs intensifying as she clung to him. No, Ruta. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to protect him. She then turned to Kodo, her tear-filled eyes locking onto his. All the plots to assassinate the president, those were orchestrated by his father, not Ruta. It was all because of his father. I heard everything he said before he died. Ruta's expression crumpled in pain, the weight of Durika's words crashing down on him. He realized with dawning horror why Durika knew these secrets and the full extent of her revelation to Kodo. Kodo, struggling to piece together the puzzle, felt a wave of confusion. When my biological father died, I was very young, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. Ruta was the same age as me, he couldn't have killed my biological father. Durika's expression shifted to one of extreme surprise. Is your father Kaki? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kodo, caught off guard, nodded. That's right, he confirmed, his voice laden with uncertainty. Tears streamed down Durika's face as she continued, her voice quivering with emotion. Are you Xion? Xion is your birth name. Is that true? His father hired just to harm your biological father, Kaki, and your adoptive father, Natsu. Then, he blamed you for assassinating the president. He bribed a judge at the Potential Admiralty Committee to take away a red card from Ruta so he could win the championship. As Durika's words washed over him, clarity began to dawn upon Kodo. The intricate web of deceit and manipulation, woven through the years, suddenly made sense. Images of the past flashed before his eyes, his childhood, the pain of loss, the betrayal. Everything fell into place like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, each revelation bringing him closer to the truth he had sought for so long. Durika, her voice now pleading, implored Kodo one last time. Please, spare Ruta, she begged, her tears flowing freely. But Ruta, overcome with suffering, cried out in anguish. I don't need you to beg him. Please, Kodo, kill me. End this pain. Before Kodo could respond, a shadowy figure emerged from the corner of the room, launching a swift kick at Kodo. Instinctively, Kodo raised his left hand to block the blow and, with his right, seized the attacker's neck, swiftly throwing him to the ground. Durika and Ruta barely had time to scream. The figure lay on the floor, a young boy of about 12. Kodo stared into the boy's eyes, recognizing the innocence within them, the same innocence he had once had. It was Randu, the son of Ruta and Durika. For a moment, Kodo's heart wavered. He saw in Randu's eyes the reflection of himself, the same spark of youth and potential. As the boy struggled to his feet, Kodo slowly released his grip, his anger and desire for vengeance melting away. He turned to leave, his resolve weakening in the face of the boy's innocence and Durika's pleas. Without looking back, Kodo spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Live happily, Durika. With that, Kodo disappeared into the encompassing darkness, leaving behind shadows of redemption that flickered like candlelight in the room where so much had been revealed. As he walked away, the weight of his journey lifted slightly from his shoulders, though the memories and scars of the past would remain with him forever.